Thanks, Tsepiso, and welcome back to our makeshift studio here at the National Results Center in Tshwane. With me still is, of course, Terry Tselane. We're going to pick up on a conversation that we had earlier about what's going to happen or what may happen next in the most hotly contested parts of this particular election. And we're talking here about the metros, not all of them perhaps, but certainly the four that includes Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane, Johannesburg, as well as Ekurhuleni. That conversation is going to come up in a short while. I am going to perhaps bring into the conversation Francis, my colleague who is right next to me, who is going to take us through some of the latest numbers. Well, Francis, you heard what the politicians had to say a little earlier, but you can tell, especially among the biggest political parties, namely the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, spirits a lot muted, than was the case,
well,
only
I'm surprised they're not more muted. I'm surprised they're not more muted. And another theory is that maybe the ANC is even relieved because it thought it could drop even more. There were predictions, there were polls saying that the governing party could drop below 50%. And what we have right now is just the overall picture. And remember, this picture can change at any time. But we do have the ANC with less than 50% of the votes. And then if we're looking, we'll go a little bit later into each and every big metro, because that is the main concern, that the ANC is losing ground in these urban areas where people are moving to. Excuse me, but we were just looking at some of the predictions. So the ANC got in Joburg 45% last time. The CSIR are projecting 35%. That's obviously only for the PR vote, and of course things can change as the wards come in. But that would mean that the ANC is losing in the city of gold, the industrial hub of South Africa that was already hard to run because of coalition. Not only that, but the DA also is going to lose ground in Joburg, possibly in the likes of Ekurhuleni as well, possibly Tshwane, the DA looking better in Nelson Mandela Bay. But these two parties losing ground to the newcomers. We spoke to Action SA. The EFF seems to be gaining, not by huge amounts, not major traction. You spoke to the EFF's Treasurer General and to the Action SA leader, very emboldened, and they are going to show the big two, what they are made of. They are not going to make life easy for them, as of course conversations move towards, coalition arrangements and what needs to happen next. So we'll come back and we'll look later at the cities, but coalition government is here to stay, and like you've been discussing, will the politicians rise to the plate this time? Action SA is saying that it will not work with the ANC. The ANC is an evil party. So we'll see. Will they work with the DA? Will the EFF this time work with the ANC? She was saying that last time they wanted to kick out the ANC. But right now, I think we don't know what discussions are happening behind the scenes.
Well, it'll be interesting, Terry, because, of course, there's the initiative I've been talking about in very vague terms, because everyone is keeping it hush-hush, at the moment. But essentially, it's about introducing some rules of the game. Obviously, you need to get buy-in, especially from the big political parties. So it's being, broached as more of a guidelines at the moment, but I think eventually it'll get to the point of actually coming up with rules, including legislation that will actually speak to how these arrangements should actually be made. But it shouldn't surprise us that you first need to test the waters, or the people behind it need to test the waters and get buy-in from the big political players first.
Absolutely. The results obviously have just come, and then as a result of these results, the political parties now will start having conversation amongst themselves.
Different conversations from ones they would have had only a day ago, actually, given how humbling, these results may be, especially for the big two.
Absolutely. So, if they do not develop rules immediately, then we're going to have a state of paralysis in all these municipalities that are hung municipalities. And therefore, there is a need for them now to finalize arrangements quickly with the understanding that eventually we will have to develop a legislation in order to govern all these relationships that are going to be emerging out of this hung municipalities.
A little later on, after 7, I'll be talking with other colleagues. Ibrahim Fakir is one of those who are going to join us about now the politics of that. But while we're still talking about the sort of more administrative and procedural or process issues around this election, I want to take you back to, the briefing that the IEC held around 11 o'clock this morning. Again, lots of questions were being raised there. There's a couple of things I want to explore with you because you have the advantage that most of us don't have of having been part of the IEC machinery as a commissioner, and you have done several of these elections in that capacity. One of the major issues, or a couple, one of the issues that people keep going back to is the tendency, for lack of a better word, to then want to blame the IEC for the turnout, that is now lower than expected or lower than ideal that we saw yesterday. I'm interested in knowing what your views are, especially now that you've had the advantage of being there and now you're an outsider looking in. Just your thoughts around, because that found expression again today from political parties, but also from some of the journalists and analysts who have been commenting or talking about this.
I think it's a little bit unfair to criticize the Electoral Commission for low voter turnout. The electoral process is a joint responsibility. It's a joint responsibility between quite a number of players. Political parties have got the responsibility to mobilize, to agitate, to incite their supporters to be part of the process. And then, the question is whether they really play that particular role. Media also has got a role to play in terms of making sure that they mobilize people to go to the voting station. Of course, this does not mean that we should absolve the Commission from the mistakes that they have made during these elections. But we must blame the Commission and make the Commission take accountability for its operational shortcomings and not try to blame the Commission for some of the things that should actually be put squarely on the shoulders of the political parties.
Yes. Speaking then of the sort of management, of the election, and I remember us having this conversation a couple of days ago, that how the IEC needed to move with the times, and with that came the introduction of new technologies that are going to help the IEC manage, the elections better, but also which then give it the ability to get insights into information it would otherwise not be able to have, were it not for the introduction of, these new technologies. Of course, the IEC has really been saying, without this, the technologies we are introducing, which have their, advantages and disadvantages, we wouldn't be able to run, a better election. On the other hand, you have arguments, from some of us journalists who are saying, but then if you didn't have the time or sufficient time to be able to test your systems so that you can tell that you've built a lot of resilience into your systems, then perhaps you should not have introduced those things in the first instance. Your thoughts, very briefly?
Well, I agree that the Commission should not have introduced a technology that they had not tested for this election. And then clearly, as indicated even in the reports that they gave, they themselves considered that there were glitches. Essentially what they're saying is that there were problems. And then these problems emanated largely from using the technology that had not actually been tested.
And no matter how confident you might be about the need to do what you had to do, at the end of the day, it also speaks to the integrity of the election, because whatever people may surmise or see to be the reasons why we are now arguing over this and the other thing, they will ascribe it to that introduction of the new technology, and no matter how important it was.
Indeed, I mean, the technology was supposed to be assisting the Commission to ensure efficiencies in the system. But as we now know, during the registration process, there were some difficulties in quite a number of voting stations where the technology itself could not actually be deployed. And then some of the staff members were not properly trained, they did not understand how it operates, and therefore could not even use it. They had to do manual registration of people. And that's why you ended up with a situation where quite a number of people who had registered during that period were not reflected on the voters roll.
And politicians crying foul.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to leave it for now with Terry Tselane.